Uh, Hello, dear listeners of the Triumph and Trials podcast. Today we have with us Mr. Gus Taylor, right? So, Gus, first of all, before we start, tell us a bit more about who you are, where you're coming from, what you're doing at the moment.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Gus Taylor. As you'll probably pick up from my accent, some of you might guess I'm Australian. I'm from Sydney, but I live over in the Netherlands in Rotterdam.
Okay.
I have quite a long background working in media, specifically digital media. And I've worked for quite a range of media agencies over the years, a lot of the bigger kind of holding groups around the world. But more recently, close to 3 years ago, I started my own business, which is kind of transforming, I guess, from more like a freelance contract basis into more of an agency.
Okay. And what made you start your own business?
Lots of
What
things.
was wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's what made me. I think it does take a certain type of person to start with. I think I've probably got. I'm a bit of a risk taker, I guess, and I think I've always enjoyed working for the agencies that I came from, but I think yeah, I think I was willing to kind of take a bit more control over what I was doing personally. I guess, yeah, I wanted to kind of lead myself or a team in future as well. And then have a bit more flexibility around the direction that the business is going and start to kind of make more significant decisions myself.
Okay. Okay. So let's start with the first question. What was the worst failure you ever experienced during that life as an entrepreneur, as a business owner?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one. So I mean, I've got marketing and media experience, but I wouldn't
Mhm.
say I've got business experience. So I
Okay.
think very quickly when I quit my full-time job, it was kind of like I was definitely in the deep end, and I had to quickly try and figure out a lot of things. I needed to kind of understand, all the expenses involved from day one. Even just a matter of registering a business as a small or as an SME was already a challenge, and then understanding kind of how to make sure that it was continuously profitable and those kind of things that for some people might have been basic, but for me, without necessarily having that experience previously, was a bit more of a challenge. And I think the other thing is just for me again, like trying to go from being more like a freelancer or a contractor, and then trying to turn it around quickly to be more into an agency was probably the biggest challenge.
Hmm. And so, but what was the moment where it did really hurt?
I think probably so, and I'll come into this later around successes, but I think early on, I managed to get fairly large clients to start with, quite
Okay.
well known brands, and I think yeah, probably the part that hurt was measuring like how long I would have that client for, whether it was kind of going to be recurring revenue, and how long I could kind of retain that client for, and then at one point what the work I did with them did finish, and I think that's the point that it kind of hurt, because then it's like, ooh, there could potentially be a few months here where I don't have work, where I don't have the same amount of revenue coming in. And I think, yeah, big lesson there as well. Definitely scary. Um, and I knew it's what I signed up for, but I think it's one thing kind of knowing it, but then when it actually happens, that's the moment where it's like a wake up call when you really learn, I guess, a business lesson.
Yeah. Would you say that you did like many of us did or maybe doing, that you find a client and then you produce, you work, and when it's done, then you say, shit, I need to find a new client. Or instead of I'm looking for clients all the time, even though when I'm producing.
Exactly. And I think that's it. It's almost like I've definitely gotten better at, yeah, managing a pipeline, as opposed to just saying, oh, yeah, it's going well now. It all feels great until it doesn't.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I definitely kind of fell into that trap. And it's funny because I think I probably heard it from people before I started my own business a lot of times, but it still doesn't really kick in until it happens to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd probably say that's probably the biggest. Yeah, I don't know if I'd put it as a failure. It's very hard to say that anything's a failure. I'm trying to kind of make sure that everything's just a lesson, but that's probably the big one, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good thing also to consider that everything that didn't go well is a reason to learn something and to
Yeah,
grow. And so, do you have people working with you, or are you, as they say, a one-person business?
yeah, I do. But again, it's kind of like so I've got a full-time employee that works for me, so it's just the two of us. And then what I do is I kind of dip into subcontractors as needed. And I think, I mean, this feeds into kind of I guess some of the big lessons that I've learned with the business, but I think the ability to outsource and tap into certain specialists when I need them.
Hmm.
I guess my business being kind of a lot of what I do is on a consulting basis. So then I can tap into certain experts when I need them as well, rather than having a full size
Mm.
or at least a large team to work with.
Right.
Um, yeah.
How do you build that outsourced providers base? How do you find them? How do you make sure that they are? Because one thing is that you have a brand. It may be yourself, it may be the name of your company, and you have values and so on. So how do you make sure that the people that you take on board or that you contract are going to represent you well?
Yeah. I think so far I've probably been lucky that I've worked with all the people at some point in my career
Okay.
already.
Okay.
Yeah. So I haven't hit a point yet where I've needed to kind of recruit or look for new people that I haven't kind of previously got that experience. Um, so that's it. I think so far I've relied on people that I kind of trust a lot and that I already know are experts in their field. But I think the big thing that I've I guess learned or valued in what I've done so far is just kind of not burning any bridges and always kind of maintaining relationships with people over the years.
Mm.
And no matter where I live, like I still work with people in Australia. I work with people in London, in the Netherlands. Um, I still have those relationships with people, and some people from close to 10 years ago who I've worked with within my business, but I've also had them as customers, and I might have worked with them within their company previously. So I think the big thing is kind of how I've managed to do it is maintaining relationships, but also I guess referrals, talking to those people that I know are experts,
Mm.
and then saying to them, who do you know that's also an expert in their
Yeah.
field? Um, yeah, that's what's worked well for me.
Okay. Okay. So now to the good part, the successes, the triumphs.
Yeah,
What's the biggest success? What's the thing you're the most proud of until now? Because the future brings more for sure, but until
yeah.
now.
I think the big thing is probably when sorry, don't know what that was. um, yeah, I think it's probably when I did start on my own from day one, I had business lined up. Um, I had, two customers from the very first day, which I think I was probably the biggest success because it kind of was a launch platform, I guess, for me to be able to focus on what I'm good at. I guess to be completely transparent, I'm not the best salesperson. I think I'm a great marketer and media specialist, but definitely not sales. So I think for me, having that stability, having that kind of starting point was probably like the biggest triumph. And not only that, again, I mentioned before, like I started with fairly large, reputable companies, which I could then kind of use, I guess, as kind of trophy clients to be able to
Right.
say, look, I've been able to do it with these businesses. It works. My kind of formula, it does work, and I can kind of show those results. And then, if anything, that's kind of led me to where I am now, 3 years later. Like I've just been able to go from one kind of well-known, reputable brand to another, but also attract some smaller clients along the way as well.
Hmm. And so those first clients, were they people from your previous career, or people that you
Um,
really
Not
hunted?
really. Yeah, if anything, it was referrals. So it wasn't necessarily people that I'd worked directly with, but maybe somebody else I had worked with, and then they'd referred me.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. So that's the network that does everything.
yeah, yeah. And I think like I'm definitely at a stage now where I'm still leveraging the network and word of mouth. Um, but to my point earlier, I'm also trying to build a pipeline. I'm trying to kind of tap into well, I guess try and create a bit more awareness for my company, for my brand, through kind of other media channels and things like that.
Okay. So the question, how two questions. How do you grow your pipeline and how do you grow the awareness? What techniques are you using or solutions and would you suggest people try using?
Yeah. Few things. So, um, I I think like for me, again, because I've got a media background, the way that made the most sense for me was building like a marketing funnel. And that meant that if I had kind of an awareness and a consideration and a kind of purchase or a lead kind of funnel, then I can also give myself the satisfaction that I'm potentially going to tap into um, prospects who are likely to convert fairly early on. And that's where the kind of word of mouth or the networking part comes
Mm,
in. But then if I look at more the consideration and awareness stages, that would be more like growing my organic social media, following and starting to create content as well and trying to show the areas that I'm an expert in. So yeah, I think growing my kind of social following and then sharing that content with them is a big part of it. And then eventually, I haven't really tapped into this yet, but then I'll start to put some kind of paid advertising behind that as well. And that's really to grow the reach more than anything. So less
okay.
about tapping into my existing community and more about finding a new audience.
Okay. So I know that's a very fuzzy figure, but would you say that your network, your what we call your power base, lasted for 2 years, 2, 3 years, and that now it's a time that you go meet new people, you expand the network? Is that reasonable to say so that it lasted that long, or?
I don't know. I would almost say that if I wanted to keep everything going at the same size, I
Mm,
could probably keep it going just through referrals.
okay.
But if I wanted to grow it, I think yeah, and that's what I want to do. I definitely want to grow it to a certain size. I think I'm still figuring out what that kind of goal is. Um, but yeah, if I wanted to keep it the same kind of amount of revenue coming in every year, then I could probably go off referrals. But I think I want to grow it. I want to have more stability within the company, and therefore, I definitely think, yeah, I need to kind of grow a bit more of a network.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I was asking that question on purpose because very often people ignore that they know quite a lot of people. No, it's now, I run also a multi-layered marketing real estate business on the side, and it said
Yeah,
that around when you're around 40 years old, you know at least 2,000 people. So
yeah.
that's what the stats are saying. So
But I think that's also
it includes your baker, your cleaning lady, whoever you
yeah,
met, or even the guy who bullied you at school
yeah.
belongs to it.
But I think that's also it. I think it's also like it's almost worth doing like a stock take on everybody that you know
Yeah.
and saying, okay, hang on. And it's easy to think like it's easy to only look at the people that are within your kind of field of work.
Mm,
But to your point, yeah, when you start to look at whoever, like the people at the local shops, maybe there's potential that that person could be a customer of yours, or they've got a friend who could be. And that's, I mean, that's kind of how we've ended up talking today. It's
yeah,
it's through
exactly.
connections of connections.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big lesson that I'm learning that every day. Every day, like something new pops up, or someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn or something, and then I'm like, oh, how did you find me? And then they mention someone else, and it's like, oh wow, like yeah, um,
Yeah, because you
yeah,
guys should know that Gus got referred to me, or I got referred to you by a common contact, right? because I say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm starting that new podcast. I say, oh, you should talk to Gus, and he will get in touch with you. So, poof, here we are.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
that's very cool. I mean, I like that, and
Yeah.
it's also, and I think people who are listening should think about that. It's genuinely people like to help you. I think
Yeah.
if you're not the worst asshole on earth, people genuinely are happy to help you. You know, it's
I think, yeah, I definitely learned that lesson at some point as well. And it's amazing how people that maybe you think are going to be reluctant actually aren't. I don't know. I think
yeah,
as human beings, we're naturally, yeah, we like to help.
yeah,
And I think like I've heard some kind of statistic previously where like when you ask someone to do something for you, then they're more likely to help you with something in future as well. So it's
yeah.
like,
It's there is a specific name for that in brain science. I can't remember. In
yeah,
fact, it's when you make a little first little step, then you are ready to make other little steps. If you ask for a first very big step, they will never make it because it's a too big a step.
right.
But if you ask
Yeah,
for small steps, they will get there. They will get there. So
yeah,
if you help them, then they will reciprocate because it's also something in the brain. Your brain needs to reciprocate, sometimes way more. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So as we're talking about lessons, what type of lessons would you like to share with the audience?
yeah. I had a bit of a think about this. I think I've tried to kind of, I could go on for a while about this topic, but I think I've tried to narrow it down to kind of six key things.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
yeah, I think the first one would be outsourcing fairly quickly. And when I say outsourcing, I don't mean kind of hiring necessarily a
Yeah.
company to do a task, or even hiring an internal person. I think what I mean by that is more, I guess, asking for advice, and literally building on what we just spoke about, asking for help from people or getting someone's opinion on something. I think, not being afraid to do that, because it is a very lonely, adventure kind of when you're starting a business by yourself. Or even if you're in a partnership or whatever the situation, it still can be very lonely, and you don't always have those kind of people around you to bounce ideas off. So I think rather than spending hours researching things, sometimes it might be worth just reaching out to somebody else that you
Mm,
think might know more about a particular subject, and asking them about it. Um, and I think another benefit to that is it also allows you to then focus on what you're good at, and maybe gives you some time back to then pick the things that you want to learn. So already for me, hiring someone has freed up a lot of my time. I can
right.
kind of get their opinion on that. Sometimes I work on my own website. Other times I reach out to a more of a professional developer, and then I get him to tweak some things, save myself time, but I'm still building kind of new capabilities for
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I think that's the big first. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, After that, I'd probably say um, maintaining relationships with people that are around you. Again, even if they're not kind of um, in the same kind of niche that you work in. But I also think it's also worth focusing on kind of complementary skill sets.
Hmm.
Um, so I think, yeah, building a network of people that can kind of help you out, but then might also potentially lead to further business. And I think just like I've had some leads and clients that I've worked with where initially I would have been afraid to ask them whether they knew anyone else that needed my services. But now I'm kind of learning to just go for it, and there's no reason to kind of hold back with that kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's been a big lesson.
yeah. We are often very scared to ask things because
Yeah,
we think we'll get rejected. We are scared of rejection, when in fact the person in front of you doesn't care.
yeah,
If that person has information, she will share it with you.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's yeah, always been the case. I almost think I've never had someone so far come back and say, "Well, no, I can't help you."
yeah,
There's always some not nice element to it, I guess, or a way that they probably can help.
yeah.
um, the kind of third item would probably be ensuring. So, it obviously takes a lot of work, and I was prepared for that when starting the business, and even to this day, there's definitely long hours involved. I think I always try to respect my day or my week as well, and kind of say, okay, like maybe the first few days of the week or first couple of weeks of the month were really tough, and I try to give myself some time back, or at least some kind of relaxation. And I think just kind of keeping in the back of your mind how easy it is for people to burn out, or to
Right.
hit a wall, or whatever it might be, however you want to put it. I think just being conscious of that, and trying to understand how you can switch off. Sometimes I might be working on certain things, whether it's for a client or just for my business, could be working till 10 p.m. at night. And I definitely don't recommend it, but I think if you got to hit a deadline, sometimes you do that. But then it's important to say, well, maybe the next morning you take it easy. Maybe
Yeah.
you don't work for the first couple of hours and give yourself some time back, or take a day off here or there. I mean, the whole point of being able to run a business is that it is in your hands, and you should be able to create a bit more flexibility that you might have not had when you're a full-time employee.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think within that, I already did a little bit of like meditation and things like that before I started working with my business. But then I think those kind of things became even more important. And that might not even be something where, it might not be what you think as meditation. It might be going for like a run or something, and it might kind of do the same trick, or exercising, or listening to podcasts, or whatever it might be, something where you can switch off and relax.
Right. Right.
And then I think also within that, probably spending time, like for me, spending time with my family. I've got two young daughters. So yeah, I think it's amazing how, like, it's definitely a second job having a young family. But it gives me something that I don't get out of my business. Sometimes working's a break from them, but they're definitely also a break from work.
Yeah, it works both ways.
Yeah, for sure. So that's probably the third one, I think, around eating, trying to eat healthy, trying to exercise, all those things, which can obviously turn around quite quickly. And I think it's just a matter of reminding yourself and getting back on track. Fourth one, I would say, is around. This is an interesting one. I would say so I used to always think the customer is always right.
Yeah.
And I think in Australia, this is a really big thing. Like, it's especially when you look at like hospitality and things like that. But even any business, more commercial businesses would always kind of have that mentality. But I think I'm starting to teach myself that that's not always true. And there is some difficult customers out there. And I think what I've learned is when the customers are wrong, it's maybe because of a lack of education. Maybe they're not understanding what you're explaining to them, but their way of communicating, because they don't understand, could be kind of they could be frustrated, or they could come across, annoyed about a particular subject. So what I've learned to do is I'm already kind of a calm, kind of patient person, but I tell myself to go back to kind of education mode. Okay, hang on, like, what I've recommended is the right approach, even though they don't agree. I just need to go back to why that is and re-educate. And I think, this also ties into kind of sales, I guess. And it's, if someone says no initially to your proposal, you can probably re-educate them as to why it's the right idea, and then ultimately, probably convince someone and make them feel confident in what you've suggested.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think for me that was definitely difficult, because I've always been I'm definitely a people pleaser. I admittingly would tell anybody that. So I think I've had to teach myself over the years to be more outspoken and to give my opinion. Probably ties in with a bit of imposter syndrome as well. So I think, as soon as I give my opinion, I'm like, oh, hang on, that actually went well.
No, it
I feel
works.
good. Yeah, it works. Yeah. And then people go, oh, thank you for giving your opinion. And I'm like, oh, how great. I also, having a Dutch wife probably helps as well. That the Dutch are known to be direct,
Yeah,
and I think it's if I look at my wife's probably the most direct, but also polite person at the same time, and I think that balance is just absolutely key.
yeah, it
So
can be
for me,
both. Absolutely.
yeah, and that's what I'm striving to kind of get to. This improve my directness while maintaining, being polite. And I think I've seen a lot of people get that very wrong. They can be direct and they just come across incredibly rude, and it
Yeah,
ruins relationships. Okay, two more key things I
yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah. Keep going, keep going.
Keep going. So the fifth one would be celebrating the successes.
Nice. That's a nice one. Important one.
Yeah, and I think no matter how big or small they are, it's easy to to watch LinkedIn and see companies celebrating these huge milestones and think, oh, I'm nowhere near that. So I think it's social media makes it's so easy to compare all the time, and I definitely have taught myself not to do that, and just to take really small milestones that are important to me personally, but also my business, and celebrate them. And I think whether it's um, cracking open a bottle of champagne, or going for a nice lunch, or just treating yourself to something. I think it's important, and with your colleagues, and taking them along, or your employees, whatever they are, taking them along for the ride as well, and getting them involved in the kind of hype and the targets that you've got for the business.
Mm, mm.
I think is really important. But yeah, definitely don't compare yourself too much to others around you that are maybe at a different stage within their business anyway.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think I touched on before the imposter syndrome. So this is my last kind of big lesson, I think. But I touched on the imposter syndrome part. I think, it's easy to kind of to lose some confidence sometimes, and not really believe in your successes. So I guess this ties into the last point as well. But yeah, I think that the way to counteract that is a few different things. I think what I've found is looking back at kind of testimonials, or what people have said about the work that you've done, is really important. It always gives you a nice kind of pat on the back.
Yeah.
I think building out kind of case studies is also really good, and kind of reflect back on those results and see, okay, wow, this is what I've managed to achieve. I think another way is catching up with people, or surrounding yourself with people that know what you do well, and people that will vouch for you, and kind of tell you you've done a good job. So you want a strong support network. Like I've got 10 people I could think of right now that I could reach out to and just have a chat. And within that chat, they're going to say, oh, well done. Awesome. Like, great to hear
Yeah.
what you're doing so far. So it doesn't need to be family. Obviously, family is an obvious one, but I think it could be professional connections that you've got. It could be
Yes.
friends, especially people that have seen where you've come from with the business, and where you've managed to get to. And then I think for any of those people, it's always worth asking for their opinion as well, or asking for feedback. Sometimes I've asked for feedback from clients, and then they can be a little bit surprised sometimes that I'm asking for feedback. But I kind of push on, and I'm like, no, it's really good for me to hear it, whether it's
Yes, of course,
positive
yeah.
or negative. Yeah. And then one more that I haven't really, around the imposter syndrome part, that I haven't really kind of managed to figure out yet, but I'm trying to find like a good mentor, someone who's done kind of, or at least followed a similar journey to what I've done, specifically around kind of media agencies. So I think that's on the roadmap. That's something that I want to try and get in place as well. But yeah, they're
I
probably
think that what you just say is very important, is that people being CEOs or business owners or entrepreneurs, whatever, working with someone else who can coach you, who can help you, is super important. Because I mean that's what we said at the beginning of this conversation. It's a very lonely journey. you can
Yeah.
feel very lonely. Even if you're in a big company, if you're running a big company, you're alone up there. So yeah, and working with someone who can be there for you, or someone's, it doesn't need to be one, could be more than one coach.
Yeah.
I mean, I spoke to people who have two, three, four coaches for different aspects of their life. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
important, and that's part of the it's the reverse of the imposter syndrome, where people think they can do everything by themselves. And yeah, I don't need that guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no one's going to do something for me. No, there are people who can help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the good thing with that is those people are also, they're there to be honest with you and to tell you kind of the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes if you ask a friend for feedback, well, they're going to not, they're just going to tell you the good stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a coach. I coach people like you, but I have
Yeah.
also a coach, and I happened to call him once. Say, I need you to kick my butt because right now I'm not doing what I should be doing, and I can't get in it. So do something, man. And he delivered my ass to me.
Yeah. See, and I think that's it. Like I'm conscious that I'm going to need that pretty soon too. Like that to have the accountability to say this is what,
Yes.
and I'm happy to set my own goals, but it's also for the other person to hear me set those goals and say, hey, well, how are you actually going with it? Are you hitting the goals, and why not?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's definitely kind of a next step. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So would you have because it was very interesting, there was a lot to be learned, but would you have one key takeaway for the listeners for today?
Key takeaway. I think the big thing is I definitely enjoy what I do. And as soon as I started my own company, yes, there was a risk in doing it, but I found it really rewarding, even with the kind of nervous kind of stages that I've had to go through, any of the kind of scares. So I think, um, yeah, I don't know. I definitely think you need to have a little bit of a risky mindset to do it. But if you do have that and you've got a genuine interest in a particular subject, and you haven't started a business, then I would definitely recommend doing it. And then I think that the biggest thing out of everything I've spoken about so far is, and you've reiterated the point as well, but it would be, it's a bit like when you raise a baby, they say, it takes a village to raise a baby. I think it's kind of a similar story with a business. You could be doing it by yourself,
Mm,
but maybe with that mindset, think that a village could probably help you is probably a good way to look at it. I think that's probably the one big takeaway. Like, reach out to everybody around you, get their opinion on things, and
yeah.
see where to go from there.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Gus. So if people want to keep talking with you or maybe need your services, where can they find you?
Yes, good question. So yeah, my company is called Malt Media, so Malt Media. So I've either through my website, maltmedia.com.au for Australia, and otherwise on LinkedIn, Gus Taylor is my name. You should be able to find me fairly easily. But yeah, probably the best options.
Excellent. So, Gus, thanks a lot for your time and for sharing all that with us. Really appreciate it. I hope we get you back soon on the podcast.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Thomas. Cheers.